Hello and welcome, everybody. Very excited to have a very special Chief Architect Network session for you today with my good friend Praveen from Mars. Praveen, do you want to quickly say hello?
Sure. Hey guys, good morning and thank you so much for taking your time to attend this event. Special thanks to Grant and also thank all the Chief Architect Network members for all your contributions and such an amazing journey here. With that said, Grant, let's kick off here.
Sounds good. So the first thing I'll do is introduce you to what the Chief Architect Network is for those of you who may not have joined us before. So we are a group of architect executive peers that focus on maximizing the value of our architecture practices through our network that widens our perspectives, shares best practices, grows us as leaders, develops talent, and drive outcomes. So we're a community-led, vendor-neutral, no-cost peer network. And if you're a chief architect, feel free to join us at chiefarchitectnetwork.com. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Praveen to tell us a little bit about what we're going to be discussing today.
Yeah, firstly, as I said, special thanks to the team here for bringing the opportunity, and it's a privilege to present on such a great topic, harnessing the agentic AI enterprise. Just want to give you a little context and set the note here. As enterprises and businesses are moving ahead with agentic AI, we are witnessing the convergence of AI-powered people, agents, robots, and which can continuously learn and which can continuously reason and also continuously plan with the context and simulate and then take actions on a purposeful note. So this powerful combination, right, of this intelligent collaboration and autonomous use cases, including people, agents, and robots, have really helping organizations to unleash a lot of potential in terms of reinventing their processes. And it's all the way from disrupting in terms of customer service, sales, supply chain, software development, and compliance. So the journey has just begun. That's the good news, and we are very good timing. I would call to be here to talk about and what is it takes for us to start that journey, and how do we need to reach a full potential, right? So ahead of us. While the opportunity is here, I also have a lot of challenges, as most of you will raise your hands with that, saying that there are financial risk, operational risk, reputational risk, data risks, and security risk coming with this kind of new shift. And that's what our session is focused on today with some industry leaders here. I wanted to introduce them in a few minutes, but before that, I wanted to take a minute here to talk about the topics we're going to discuss. The first topic would be the readiness, the business readiness in terms of change leadership, cultural change, and stuff, which is really fundamental. And the shift we are taking now in the architecture is really immense with this agentic AI at enterprise scale. And the reason you all know this is not a technology shift. This is all the way from business model, business process, data, integrations, all the whole nine yards of architecture. And that's where we need to talk about the readiness and the cultural change required here. The second one is ultimately the cornerstone that we're all accountable for, which is the architecture and integration. That is very relevant because it is really changing fundamentally how you're building your apps for future, how you're going to think about your apps in the future, how you're going to talk about the experiences, and how you're going to automate and how these autonomous activities are happening and how do you interact with them. So it's really important for us to focus on them given the current constraints as well, right, with the legacy systems and security and everything else. And the third one would be the governance, the trust, and the responsible AI. How do we start it right? We don't want to go around ballistic and then come back and fix with a lot of issues and stuff. So, how do we put a method to this madness is important from that point of view. And then the value realization, the use case prioritization. This is really, really relevant. The value realization and use case prioritization is the most important thing because we don't want to spend millions of dollars and then test and learn and then drive the inefficiency. So, and lastly, the future outlook and the skills evolution, because we really want to understand what are the skills required, how are we going to mature those skills internally and across the enterprise is the key concern here, right? So for these five topics, I have these gentlemen here, which are our guests, and thank you so much for taking the time. We have selectively selected these guests in from industry point of view, where Andreas Welsch, founder, Intelligence Briefing, and Chief AI Strategist, is with us today, Along with him is Raj Madhavan, the data and AI at Microsoft, and then Srini Devarapalli, who is our AI advisory at SAP. And with this profound guest, I think we would like to make this session fruitful for all of us. Yeah.
Amazing. Look, I'm Grant. I lead architecture at Ecolab, and I help to pull the Chief Architect Network together. I'm going to pass the reins over to Praveen, who'll be leading us through the rest of the session, but I'll come back at the top of the hour for bringing in the Q&A. So if you folk comment on LinkedIn or share your thoughts, we'll be able to use that for interactive Q&A at the top of the hour. Awesome.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
a lot, Praveen.
Yeah, thank you. Let's jump into this session, guys. And just from a quick logistics perspective here, we will take all your questions, assemble them, and we'll be reviewing them at the end of the session. Let's start with these 5 topics with our guests here to address these topics that we have. Starting with the first one, readiness and cultural changes. The readiness and cultural changes, we would like to understand from your perspective, what are the most significant organizational or cultural shifts that need to be prioritized to be successfully adapting this agentic AI shift within the enterprise.
So Praveen, maybe I can take this one, and I think it's
Sure.
it's
Go ahead,
such an important one because in this push to bring more AI, to bring more technology to the business, to ideally not only elevate productivity but also help operational efficiency, look for new opportunities to do things differently. There's this cultural aspect, that the people aspect, that I feel is a lot of times either forgotten or gets on the back burner, and we'll get to that at some point. But it's one of the most fundamental and most critical things that you need to think about as a leader, as an enterprise architect as well. How can you facilitate that? How can you guide that? So the challenges that I see are that employees are worrying. They think, not only is there another technology wave coming, but now this technology can do things that I haven't been able to do before. RPA, robotic process automation, was all about automating clicks and repetitive things and the very boring menial things. Now all of a sudden, this can automate part of the white collar work, the things that I went to college for, the things that I'm really good at, the things that I've been doing for 10, 12, 15 years. And nobody really knows exactly where this is going. Neither the leaders nor employees, but we know that there's a big opportunity to do things differently. And so looking at this change and facilitating that, providing a clear vision of what is it that we're doing and why, where are we today, where are we going in the future, so your team members understand the path and what's needed to get there. Also, the opportunity in this, right? I mean, we've said this for many years, and software has had that core premise of automating processes, making things more efficient. This is, in a sense, just the next evolution of this. So we've always done this in a way. Now it's different in that the software can take on goals, that it can work independently or semi-independently, and that's one of the big pieces to manage, and to manage the expectations as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andreas. Srini, Raj.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to add, right, like I was actually watching a podcast sometime before. There's a very fine line there that you mentioned, that think of it like human in the loop, evolution to the human on the loop. Traditionally, as an enterprises, right, we've been focused on like being a task doer, execute this transaction, process this step, record the data and everything. But the things are changing. We are actually more like a problem definers or agentic guides, rather than trying to execute the task, trying to see that like how do we solve the problem, how do we use the agents in there. That culture shift needs to happen completely in the enterprises.
Got it. Raj?
So in addition to what Andreas and Srini mentioned, Praveen, so when we talk about readiness and culture change, especially from an agentic AI, there are a few key shifts that we are seeing in addition to RPA that Andreas mentioned and human in the loop like that Srini mentioned. First, it's about moving from isolated AI experiments to business-driven and outcome-focused transformation. Instead of running AI as a side project, the most successful organization tie it directly to business priorities and measurable results. That's one. And second, we are seeing AI being embedded in like daily workflows, not just like chatbot or lab experiment. And third, fostering what we call as like ubiquitous innovation. It's really crucial. That means that like empowering every employee to be a maker, giving them access to AI tools like Copilot. And finally, building trust is essential. So that comes from like responsible AI practices, like transparency, commitment to continuous learning across the organization. So that's kind of like where we see the cultural readiness is the foundation of like scaling agentic AI.
So if I may add to that, right, that brings up an important point, Raj. You just mentioned the responsible use, and I think that's so important as well. Maybe some of you have seen this term float around the internet and float around your LinkedIn feeds. It's called AI work slop. So the type of AI generated content that is mediocre at best, low quality, produced at scale, good enough, and I send this out, I'm done, I tick the box. But then it becomes somebody else's problem, right? It lands on your desk, it lands on your inbox. You've most likely seen this kind of report, email, draft that somebody asks you to take a look at. And when you start reading it, you notice it's actually not that great. So somebody wasn't as diligent as they should have been. Somebody didn't, exercise the care, didn't bring in their knowledge, didn't get it from good to actually great. And I think that's so important now as well, because we can create information at scale now at a fraction of the cost and time of what it's previously cost us to do. But I think as leaders, we also need to instill that mindset again and reinforce it on our teams. Yes, I want you to use the technology. I want to empower you to use it, but you're not off the hook delivering great results and doing good work. Because at the end of the day, neither our colleagues in other teams, nor our partners or our customers or anybody that pays our company money is going to accept good enough, right? So to me, we need to broaden and widen the definition of responsible AI, like Raj mentioned, from how do we ensure that it's free of bias and that it's fair and these kind of things, to using it responsibly when we create information, so we don't create slop, we don't create rework for somebody else.
Thank you so much for that roundup here. So I think I have been practically seeing this shift myself, and I'd like to add a couple of comments on this. I think whenever we bring new shift in the approaches, we need to be more transparent. I think Andreas, you said it very well, and understand what's the North Star we are trying to accomplish, and then making the trust. Raj, you talked about the security, Srini, and how do we make this more trustable kind of stuff is one thing. The big challenge in this journey, this shift I see personally, is it's all the way from top down. This has to be connected back to your business strategy, business models, and business objectives, because there's a fundamental shift in how you're trying to do process differently. Because if you go back and say, hey, I have a pain point, I have a problem definition, I think you'll lost the point. You need to start with, how do I rethink this process in a way that it's going to be agentic, it's going to be an autonomous, it's going to be what is the scope of autonomicity here, what is the scope of human, what is the scope of agent, what is the scope of the robot. I think you need to connect those dots and start rethinking. That's what the whole opportunity is, rather than doing small bits and pieces like how we've been doing in the past. I think that is the cultural shift and the mindset that we need to start educating the leaders and the teams to say, hey, let's think about the business objective. What's more strategic? What's our core? Where do we need to invest? Where do we need to invest that we get the biggest value? Having that mindset and then coming down all the way in building blocks, I think that's where I see the big shift happening. But this is really a great time for us to re-emphasize the opportunity and the architecture and the discipline required to take that layered approach. And anyway, I think we also want to talk about what can we do to accelerate and stuff, but I think continuous education and bringing that North Star vision, making this AI transparency and trustable AI or responsible AI is going to be the key point there. Let's move on to the second topic here, architecture and integration, which is the near and dear to all of our hearts. When we talk about architecture now, especially when we talk about agents, there are multi vendors for producing agents, right? So ServiceNow, Salesforce, SAP, Microsoft, Google, everybody is putting agents out there. So from an architecture point of view, we need to be prepared to see how do we address this multi-agent conglomeration, I would call, and how do we address this multi-agent? And the second thing is, even from architecture of our solutions, we need to think about user experience, how the user experience completely changed, right? Whether it's mobile, whether it's phone, whether it's whether it's a voice, or whether it's a chatbots or stuff. And then how do we bring that security, visibility, transparency, and monitoring? And most importantly, what I have seen one of the key aspects miss was the whole user training. So you're introducing a completely new experience to the agent, to the people, to talk to agents and collaborate with them. But where is the training component? Where is the support model, right? So just wanted to get some of your observations on how should organizations rethink their core architecture and their integration patterns when implementing agentic AI, especially with existing legacy security controls and being responsible AI along with the cloud platform? So if you guys can start sharing your observations, that would be great help for the audience.
Yeah. So before I address the topic, actually, I want to talk about one thing, what SAP we call the flywheel effect. It's like the application data and AI are like working together to get the whole circle of the flywheel that we are talking about. Which means that when we're talking about architecture, we can't talk about AI separately. We have to talk about the application level things, what we need to take care of. Things like the clean core strategy we talk in SAP, making your core clean with the application layer. And the data, the most important thing for AI, the whole data semantics, what data is required for AI, and how do we build the data semantic layer, be able to understand whatever we have in that application level language in the data side. How do we feed it into the AI side? That's very critical, the data semantics. Last but not the least, the AI part itself, building the architecture, like exactly you said, Praveen, that the transparency, the security layer are absolutely critical in terms of like what we need to do within the AI. For that, the way I've seen most successful approach is that don't think of it like building an agent end to end, but think of it like a modular approach, trying to figure out the steps within the agent and like how do I build these things which can be reused across all the agents together. Like taking an example, like a simple example, you talk about like an PO approval process, purchase order approval process, right? You would need to get the information of a PO, purchase order, then you would need to get the information of release strategies, then you need to figure out like how do we do an approval process. So there are multiple steps. Think of them like modular, try to build these individual skills separately, figure out the security layer for each of these steps, and then talk about the whole agentic AI at the end. Don't just think about every agent as a separate thing, but rather think about those steps separately. How do I build that infrastructure together as part of my architecture?
Thank you, Rai. Thank you, Srini.
Yeah.
And to add to Praveen, to add to what Srini said, in addition to making the architecture modular, you make it composable as well. So you move towards like open, API-driven, and event-based architectures. That flexibility and composability gives it easier to connect AI capabilities with like existing systems. So as we build modern systems, the important stuff is like we should not forget like our legacy systems, because as a business user, especially during a long transformation journey, you're not going to do like a big bang, like convert everything to modern system. So as you in the journey of transformation, you have a long coexistence, and during the long coexistence, as a business user, for me, I already have 10 systems to go to get my job done, and you're introducing 11th system. So how do we make sure that we give that balance and give that like consistent user experience that you mentioned? That training is like very important, and then ensuring that like we have observability and governance at every layer. So that's kind of like really means like getting visibility into how agents operate and what data they're accessing, and making sure everything aligns with your compliance and security standards. So that kind of tops everything up as you operate with the agentic AI.
Super.
So if I may add to that, right? I've been in the industry for 23 years. I'm independent, so what I see now a lot of companies think through is really where should I place my bets? And indeed, many vendors, pretty much all of the ones that you mentioned, have added AI, have added agentic AI now to their portfolio, and we can expect that that these capabilities work really, really well within that stack, within these applications. But the reality is also business isn't just done in ServiceNow, isn't just done in Dynamics, isn't just done in SAP S/4HANA. It crosses all these systems from end to end. And what I feel is missing at the moment is the level of orchestration. Yes, there are some good protocols, agent to agent, model context protocol to use tools and so on, but we don't necessarily have that level of orchestration across all these different platforms. So I think that's something to look for and consider in your agentic strategy, also in your integration strategy. Security you mentioned. I think it's absolutely critical. If you take more of a citizen developer route, if you want to try that again, we've tried it a couple of times before in the industry. Now you have people, you have users that add their own credentials to connect to their OneDrive, to their SharePoint, to some other systems that they might have access to. How do you manage that? How do you govern it? How do you even know who has given what kind of access to what application to which agent? And what happens when that user leaves? Does the agent still run? Does it fail? Is it a business critical agent? So we need to think more broadly about that concept as well. And then I think the last one really about the integration is then also how can we compare maybe to some extent agents and humans? Sometimes the comparison is quite good because it helps us think through how do we do that for real people, for humans. Other times it holds us back a little when we compare what can they do. But just entertain the thought for a minute. Access, physical access. What do these systems have access to? The speed, the velocity with which requests are all of a sudden hitting our enterprise systems. Right? ChatGPT now allows you to do product searches. Soon you'll be able to check out, right? OpenAI, Walmart, OpenAI, PayPal, these partnerships. Are your business systems ready to handle agentic workloads, meaning agentic requests firing at a split second, executing transactions? I think that's another big question we need to ask. It's no longer just users sitting there clicking. It's also not just bots that are repeating this. It's agents, and it's a different kind of traffic in that sense, in a different kind of load. So just some additional thoughts to where I think as architects we need to be mindful and conscious of what is happening. Are we ready? How can we mitigate this? And also keep an eye out on the market. What are vendors doing? What are new emerging layers, technologies, and how do the vendors we have in-house address these things?
Wonderful topics, guys. First of all, thank you so much for this feedback. And I'll just round up here, starting with Srini. We really like your representation on the AI flywheel, thinking about AI, not just AI, it's about the applications, the data, and the AI in the totality. Great topic, Srini, on that. And then Raj, it's not about the layering, but also the composability of how we're going to build this so that we can repurpose and reuse across all the agentic enterprise. That great point. And then Andreas, you hit on a couple of great points, especially on the orchestration piece, right? With all these agents going and everything happening, and how do you orchestrate it end to end? At the same point, the security and the load and the performance and the interactions and integrations, super topics. I'll just add one thing that might not have come up clearly, but want to give justice to the audience here. The other thing we need to worry about is the context engineering and the context, right? And we talk about context in a sense like not to provide just the scope, but it's think about when we're building these agents as tightly connected with end-to-end processes. The complex processes, the more complex processes you address, the more value you'll be looking at. It doesn't mean that you take the current process and just rebuild it in agentic. You need to rethink about how can we evolve and radically shift the process. Do we need this process, or do we need this step, or just not because currently we are doing this, we continue to do the same, right? So that end-to-end process, sticking to that process mindset will help you to put all these layers behind, and it has to be very tightly connected to the process because that's what will address your business capability. That's what should be addressing your business strategic objective. I think having that architecture mindset is very important with all these points. With that said, let's move to the next topic here, which is the governance, trust, and responsible AI. We all know that we have established governance frameworks, policies, security, AI, responsible AI. Now, what is going to change? How do we need to go to each of these levels and ensure that things are changing? The reason they are changing is now we are working with several LLMs, large learning models, with third parties. It's going through OpenAI, going through language models, going through Gemini, going to several ones. How do we ensure that once our data is out of our enterprise and it's going through an agentic AI platform and then it goes into multiple LLMs, how are we ensuring the trust? How are we ensuring the accountability? What do we need to do to establish that traceability, auditability, and how do we manage this risk? Can you suggest some frameworks or any best practices? What's your observations? You might have already seen some initial use cases of data infiltration or reputation issues or data leakage issues. So we just would like you to address the audience. What should we do in terms of best practices or frameworks or any accelerators you might suggest? We'll start with maybe Andreas. You can start, and then the rest of the team can follow.
Sure. So it needs different layers and different levels. If you start at the team level, what should leaders tell their teams? Again, how to empower and encourage them to use AI and use AI responsibly. I think this can be pretty simple, right? We empower you and encourage you to use AI. Here are the tools that are available, and you're not off the hook doing great work. Right? Those three things, I think that's the bare minimum. From there, it moves more to a business group, somewhat technical level, to say how do we want to use the technology in ways that is responsible, right? To your point, we've created AI policies. Some are aligned with the EU AI Act, some maybe more with the NIST AI risk framework. But there are probably some use cases where you say, this is what we're not going to do. We're not going to touch any of these because, first of all, they're prohibited or highly regulated in different industries. But there are some, right, that are perfectly fine. It could be a basic IT support chatbot or agent or HR or finance or whatever use cases you have. What kind of decisions do we want to automate, and do we want to delegate to an agent? And how do we know that we can trust this agent to do the work well that we assign it to do? So it'll take some iteration, some feedback loops, whether it's in individual teams, but mainly between technology and business stakeholders. That's the big thing, obviously, to get this right. But to me, this responsible part, the policies, how do we want to use this? That's the critical aspect, because also. Quite frankly, in a lot of the conversations I have both with leaders and also when I give trainings on how do you use AI well, employees are also confused and a little afraid. Yes, sure, I should use all these tools, but nobody tells me how to use them. What if I put some data in there and it's confidential data and I'm not allowed to do that? Is there any punishment that I need to fear? Am I on the hook for this? Right? So these kinds of rather basic assurances and enablements, I think, are critical as well if you want to see a good and scaling adoption of agentic AI.
Thank you, Andreas.
So to add to Andreas, so many customers, including Mars, we are seeing they establish like a centralized like governance body that operates independently from implementation teams. So this body enforces two-step approval. One is like approve to build. So right at the beginning, you go through the process to review, hey, what is the idea? How are you going to use the platform? What tools you're going to use? And then you can catch all these like security or compliance aspects of it like at the beginning itself. So that's one way to de-risk or minimize the risk. If not, can be completely avoided. So teams kind of present their proposed agentic workflow to the central body and receive approval before starting that development. So that's one. And then once the development completes, they come back to the same centralized body and then look for like approval to operate. So after implementation, this whole observability, like exfiltration you mentioned, so you kind of like pressure test with all your evaluation tools, and then make sure that like, okay, you're not making incorrect calls or you're making unnecessary API calls. So you review the solution and to ensure that there are no risks such as data leakage before granting permission to deploy. So by including these two milestones in the software development lifecycle, the structure helps organizations manage risk, maintain compliance, and you build trust in the agentic AI deployments.
Yeah, Andreas and Raj raised good points, right? I think the way I work with a lot of customers day in and day out, the major concern I had seen from every customer is that what is going on with my data? If you are sending the data to OpenAI or Gemini or anyone, what is happening there? Everything. That's a big concern. Totally understand. I think we should put a clear guardrails of how those LLMs are using the data. It's inevitable. We have to use those LLMs. They are the best of the breed frontier models. We have to use them, but we have to put a clear guardrails of how the data is being used within those LLMs. Plus, what are the content filtering mechanisms, or what the data is going into those LLMs, and what the data is coming out of the LLMs. All said and done, there is still a lot of hallucinations in terms of what the data is coming out. So we'll have to ensure it's our responsibility as our enterprises thinking about how do we incorporate those content filtering mechanisms, taking care of all the bias and everything, plus ensuring the security layer within the platform of SAP. When you're not SAP just, but any tools. When Andreas raised about the agent orchestration, we're also enabling the agent to agent protocol. So we'll have to think about what are the security layer things that, like Raj mentioned, like how do we incorporate into our platform? Plus, the content filtering is absolutely key for it.
No, thank you so much, guys. I think this is a good roundup here. Yeah, to summarize, security and risk needs to be thought about at each step, each activity, right? Each interaction.
Yeah.
And then the current policies might be falling short. So we need to revamp some of these policies as we learn, as we mature in this space, because there's still so much of unknown here. We're not assuming that we know everything. It's a perfect model here, because the first rule of defense is if you think this data is sensitive, data is really you don't want to fall it in other people's hands. You need to protect it from your intention, because customer always is responsible for the data. We can say a lot of policies that their contracts are there, establishment is there, still we see this data information every day in the news that everything got exposed and stuff. So how do we protect the data within our realm should be the first guiding principle. And then the agentic AI approach certainly brings a lot of additional complexity in additional use cases, additional scenarios. So our learn or our read is we need to go each step, each activity, and identify what risks are there, and then how do we mitigate those risks, or how do we address them, how do we get them signed off, so that at least we plan for whatever we know, and then whatever we don't know, we'll definitely know once they are there, and then we'll manage them, right? So it's a good session. Thank you so much for that on the security and governance and AI responsible. With that, moving forward with value realization and use case prioritization. And the reason why I'm emphasizing on value realization and use case prioritization is we have spent a lot of money over the past 5 years, 10 years doing test and learns, doing a lot of AI, playing with AI and data. But I think the prime time is right now. If you don't focus on the right use cases and the right priorities, it certainly will be hurting our trust to invest more in this space. So the question to this is, what are the broad possibilities of agentic AI, and how do you identify, priorities, and measure the ROI of high impact business use cases across different functions? And if you guys have seen some quick tangible value in your business domain, maybe you guys can step up. Hey, this is one area we really found it very purposeful. And this is very relevant for all of our teams here, because we need to focus on those problems that are priority and which make sense, rather than go and take a hammer like how we did and nail everywhere we find, right? So with that said, to the panel, please.
Yeah, maybe I can start with this one because this is near and dear to me. Every time I talk about value realization with the customers, it's mostly comes out to like, can I reduce the headcount? That's not the strategy at all. We should not think about doing the headcount reduction. When the .com came in, the internet came in, the GDP impact was $4.9 trillion per year. It's a huge impact. Imagine the AI impact on the GDP, the top line impact on the revenue that's going to bring in, AI that's going to bring in is huge. So we should think about how the value realization about like how do we get the top line impact on the overall value, that not just comes with automating a simple process, but it comes with the reimagining the whole process itself. You talk about, when you talk about the inventory levels in the different places around, or when you talk about the inventory shortage in one place, figuring out like an alternate source of supply, figuring it out like how do you generate a purchase order for them automatically and get the information faster. So there's a lot of value potential of the AI thinking about how do we have the top line or upside impact overall for our enterprise. That's absolutely the key. The way we do it is take every business process that you have, an end-to-end business process, think about what are the current process that you're doing and how do I renovate this whole process. It's beyond imagination, like whatever we could do in the past 10 years before versus now. So we'd have to sit together with all the business process owners, everyone, and sit together, like think about how can I renovate this process completely so that the value realization coming is significant from this approach for it.
So when it comes to value realization, I break it into two parts. Value realization, like what we heard from our customers, big customers like Epic. Last month alone, they generate like 6 million summaries of medical records for clinicians. So you go back 2 years, Gen AI was used more for conversational purposes, like generating a simple summary. But like how it matured and how doctors are discovering critical information 28% of the time, that a lot of times manual reviews get missed. So all the aspect of it, like to Srini's point, it's not something that like you do on a regular basis, but what you cannot do and how you can use Gen AI and Agentic AI to identify those scenarios is really important. And then how those values being realized, like for companies like Epic and like Mercedes-Benz, they simulate like in trained AI to optimize paint quality using real-time sensor data. And then how by doing it, like how they were able to reduce the energy consumption by like more than 20% and improving not just the quality, but also improving the sustainability aspects of the business. So those are all the things that like we're seeing a lot of like value being realized with the maturity of like the models, be it the process that you infuse, where you infuse it. And then when it comes to ROI, one of the effective ways we have seen organizations drive real value from agentic AI is by using OKRs, like objective and key results. How do you align like AI initiative with business goals right from the start? And you provide a clear framework for measuring impact. By setting specific objectives and tracking measurable key results, you can validate ROI against your original goals rather than like you just track technical outputs. Because a lot of times we get carried away by like technical outputs, not like really attributing to what the original goal is. By doing this approach, you keep everyone focused on outcomes that matter most to the business end of the day, and makes it easier to demonstrate the value of AI investments. And you can measure whether your AI solutions deliver that. So that's basically the way that we think we are seeing a lot of organizations are moving towards.
I love that. So, by the way, it's something that I wrote about quite extensively in the AI Leadership Handbook. I know all of you have a copy of it too, but if you're in the audience, feel free to pick it up on Amazon or anywhere where you get your books. But the key, like Raj said, is to align it in the beginning with your business goals. And I feel where the current wave of AI, generative AI, agentic AI helps is raising mindshare, raising awareness in the organizations. But quite frankly, we also need to move beyond productivity use cases. Copilot is great. SAP's Joule is great for productivity enhancements. I don't want to use Joule just to submit my leave request. There's so much more that it can do. I don't want to use Copilot just to create my PowerPoint slides or summarize the emails I've missed after vacation. Right? It's also built into the business applications, from Dynamics to SAP S/4HANA and so on. Workday, Salesforce, ServiceNow, many others are doing the same thing. But where it's gotten easier again is getting it into the hands of people to use it. You don't have to be a trained statistician or data scientist to use these tools now. But let's not forget that beneath that surface of productivity use cases, there's a whole block, kind of like the iceberg below the waterline, of operational efficiency use cases. Srini talked about that very succinctly, about the inventory, right? Supply chain use cases, in HR, workforce planning and analysis, everything around hiring, for example. You have all the personalization examples in CX, customer experience, things like that. We must not forget taking a look at those as well, because that's usually where, from my experience, a lot more business value can be created, in addition to help me write this email, help me submit my leave request. And also, let's be frank, these agents and assistants today already talk to each other and can work with each other. So productivity, good to get mindshare and to raise awareness, but real value also happens behind the scenes and below that surface.
No, I think that's a wealth of wisdom there. Thank you so much for sharing, guys. Just to round up, right? I'll start with the use case. So we have a problem definition saying that, hey, our contracts, the supplier contracts need to be renewed, and then we need to add new price lists. And then the use case was telling like, hey, currently we get all kinds of different data from our suppliers. And then take all this data and now you update the contract. That was the problem defined. So that's how we think in today's world, because that's a problem in front of us. But if you step back and think about why are these suppliers sending this data in different formats?
Yep.
Why are we getting this? So we are starting always a problem definition with a current state of problem in mindset, right? Rather, we should really think about, do we even really need this process, right? Or can we reinvent this process? That's the mindset. So then we started asking the questions, what are the critical success factors? What are the KPIs, right? And then none of those were defined in the problem statement, right? And then to your point, Andreas, we need to also understand the volumes, right? So how big is the problem? Like to Srini's point, is it a industry, is it a corporate enterprise level? Yeah, or not? That's exactly how we need to start thinking about it. But here's what we have come up with. This is maybe a key takeaway for the audience here. So whenever you're taking a problem, whenever you're understanding a use case, start with what they call as SBO, strategic business objective. And this is a framework. SBO, strategic business objective, what the business wants to accomplish in this particular space. Then you talk about critical success factors. Then you talk about process performance indicators. And then you talk about KPIs. So this metrics framework is very, very important for architects to understand, or even the people who are across the enterprise to understand that why the heck are we even doing something? And why do we need to request for a funding? To create the business model, you really need this. So follow that metrics model and you use the value realization kind of before you put a business case. I think that would help to understand really where the big opportunities are. In the interest of time, sorry, Andrea, you want to add something?
Just one point to add to it. My implementation is coming faster, but one key point is that we all think about trying to automate the complex workflows, but start with something which is high frequency, low variability processes. Everyone wants to start with AI, but think about the things that are like more low variable processes to start with. If you want to really show the success of these agents and all, start with these high frequency, low variability kind of use cases. That's where I had seen most of the success with.
That's a good tip there. High frequency, low variability. Yeah, that's really good. Thanks, Srini, for that.
Yep.
Let's get into the last question of the session, and then we can take the questions from the audience. We want to talk about a future outlook and skills evolution. We talked about a lot of technologies. We addressed a lot of security, a lot of compliance, a lot of architecture, a lot of end user mindset, process mining, process modeling. So there's new roles evolving, new skills need to be evolved to address this AI shift, right? So address this agentic shift here. So what advice would you give leaders who are just beginning this agentic AI journey? How do they look at these skills and how do they manage these skills so that they're prepared for future?
So maybe I can go first. So one of the things as an architect, I always look at the strategic way of thinking. Always forget the critical thinking aspect of it. So it's very important applying the critical thinking framework every time we use GenAI, especially GenAI, starting by establishing a clear purpose for each AI interaction using your observability tools, evaluation tools. Like we're moving from testing to evaluation. That's very important. Assessing the quality of GenAI outputs. Are they reliable, relevant, and valid? So most important, all these three dimensions you evaluate, and write prompts that are grounded in critical thinking practices as we get most useful and trustworthy results. So, and then we also have to use GenAI to simulate other perspectives and challenge our own assumptions, which help us think more deeply about our everyday workflows. So that's how, like, we're seeing many organizations now training their teams through AI Center of Excellence on both prompt engineering and critical thinking for GenAI use cases, and with observability and agent-driven telemetry like platforms that are open. We have tools to monitor, debug, and optimize these agents ecosystems in real time. So essentially, the critical thinking is the most important part as we build agents. And tomorrow, like, the architects won't just design apps; they'll design the entire ecosystem of agents that work together and across the enterprise and across the like SAP, the open ecosystem like Salesforce, Google, and all the agents have to kind of reside in one common framework with an agent registry with observability in every layer of the stack. That's kind of like how we take it forward.
Awesome. Yeah.
To me, one of the biggest things is really experimenting and trying things out. And it starts with simple things. If you have access to Copilot in your environment, go use it, try it out. I give a lot of leadership trainings for large organizations, mid-sized organizations, on how do you use Copilot well, what are some things that you might not be aware of, how you can use it. And a lot of leaders ask, hey, can you give me the framework? What are the 5 things that I need to do to get from this idea to that result each and every time? And usually my answer isn't very satisfactory, to be honest, but it's honest. And that is, there is no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 list. You need to experiment with it. It's a lot about communication, obviously, of how do we communicate with people now, how do we communicate with an AI? And you get better through practice. So maybe that means you need to set aside half an hour a week or an hour a week, if you can afford it, to experiment with it. Use it for something that isn't necessarily urgent, but where you can experiment, and you see if it takes longer, it's fine, and I still have some time if I need to do it myself, but at least I've learned something in the process. It's never been that easy before to use this kind of software, this kind of powerful software. Many of us have it in our pockets. So if you're on the train, at the airport, play with it, try it out. What it will help you is spot opportunities and also develop a better understanding for your team members that are using it, right? One of the other big hurdles to adoption is employees saying, well, my manager might think I'm lazy, I'm incompetent, or I just get more work if I use AI and I tell them that I use it. Well, I would say the opposite is actually true. You're not lazy, you're not incompetent. I can't promise that you get less work, but the big part is it's about experimentation. Modeling this, role modeling this is so important. And then also as a leader, you have a better understanding for where does it work, where does it not work. And given that there's so many news in any given week by so many different vendors, things are moving incredibly fast. So what isn't working today might well be working a quarter or 2 quarters from now. So iteratively experimenting is my big recommendation there.
Super. Praveen?
Yeah, I mean, just to add, the way I think the skills change, right? Like we talk about data architects, we talk about technology architects, enterprise architects. But actually, the way I see it is, I think we'll have an agent architect itself as a role. These agent architects are not just IT or a functional people, but it's a combination of people who understand the business process. With a little bit of a tech savvy, you could do vibe coding with a lot of things, but the roles will change more like the one I was talking about. They're not like executing the transaction. They're talking about what problems do I have in my business process? How do I solve them? Removing the barrier to the agents. Agents will do a lot of things around executing those transactions, but as a process owner, business process owner, an IT person, I'm thinking about how do I reimagine this current process that I have with the help of the agents, And I call myself as an agent architect in the future state, trying to reimagine the process, trying to do the reasoning models. How do I incorporate all the reasoning and everything into my agentic layer is going to be the key skill in the organization.
That's an excellent point, Srini. Thank you so much. A roundup on that. Firstly, we have a exclusive program for training for AI, and a lot of enterprises should have them, and they should be executing this right now. But what we realized with agentic is, again, going back to that context. The context is very, very important, right? So you need to start understanding the skills that are needed to understand the process, like how you rightly said, mind the process, and then continuously look at the insights and see what are the opportunities to reinvent the process. So that skills is first layer, right? And then the understanding the business strategy, the business is again. So none of these skills are old, none of these skills are new as well. But the problem is we are not been doing an efficient, or we're not investing in the right capacity in the past. Now it's the time to do it, because without that, the autonomicity will not work. The agents cannot be successful without having this right context provided. So the business strategy, the business model, the business priorities, the KPI model, as we talked about, then moving into the processes, then moving into the data, then moving into the applications and the technologies and the security. All these models need to be modeled. It's not going to be a magic thing. So there is an investment involved. A lot of enterprises might already have some of this. They need to reinvest on this and then try to bring these models right. And that brings the context value of how are we establishing the context. And then based on the context, the agents can really operate autonomously, I think, with some controls there. So that is an investment needed. That's a big business case proposition to CIOs to bring all these new technologies, all these new skills, and all these to invest and make this AI work truly to gain the value. It's a big investment, of course. That's the challenge in front of the CIOs and CFOs, very, very honestly. And to show this cost to value, that's the second piece we talked about. So fundamentally, if we have to leave out a takeaway for the audience is, the costs are there. It can't be shortcuts anymore, because you take the shortcuts, then it's not going to be successful. So while you're investing in it in a ramp up model, you can take a couple of approaches. The AI COE that Raj mentioned is a good one to bring that AOE. We are taking AI COE, and also we're putting AI squads, which are really the AI architects, like Srini was bringing up, so they can start thinking about value and then start thinking about reinventing the processes and trying to focus on that business process first mindset, so that we can see the technology later, kind of, right, as they come together. So that's the key observation here in terms of skills. And then we definitely have to invest in this to get the right outcome as we prepare for the future. With that said, firstly, I wanted to give a big thanks to all the speakers here, and thank you so much for sharing all your experiences. And then we wanted to wait for all the questions, and then Grant, please facilitate those questions, and we'll be happy to answer.
Sounds great. Well, again, just to reiterate, thanks for a fantastic session. And there's a number of questions that have come in throughout the session, so we're going to try to find those, but it's easier to find the new ones. So comment live below, and we'll focus on those. But we'll start with Wolfram's question that Andreas expressed some interest in. How best, or how do we educate best? How do we, what makes the most sense? What are the capabilities we're enabling? Standard structures? Anyone, have any experience establishing AI COEs beyond tech teams? I think we all might have something to share on that. Stakeholders and power users. So, Andreas, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, Madhavan, I think that's an awesome question, because a lot of times, right, we look at technology through a technology lens, and also through teams that are in a technology function, IT or a CTO organization. But really, where I've seen the most value for the organization be created is if, first of all, this AI COE is independent of an IT or a technology function, but it has its own reporting line to CAIO. Ideally, if that's not the case in your environment or the customers that you work with, the recommendation would be to, in either case, look at opportunities to collaborate with HR on learning and development. Many things that Praveen has mentioned about training, first of all, leadership development and enablement, but also then our individual contributors. What tools are available? How do you use them? How do you use them responsibly? without creating slop, without exposing our data to risk, these kinds of things. It goes on to what tools and platforms are available to us. If you're in a technology business or a business that builds software or builds software on its own, so how do you use them, right? That's more for a technical audience, but a lot more about the governance too, and the enablement, right? Governance. Many organizations have established intake processes. Hey, we're being flooded with requests. I need this tool with AI. I need that tool. Can I buy this? And all of a sudden, you don't really have a good overview of your spend, of your exposure risk level to some extent, the integration between different tools. Maybe you have 2 or 3 tools in the environment for the same thing. We've all seen the problems before, right? So how do you set up your governance, your intake process, also in a way that it doesn't take 3 months to get to a decision, but maybe a week or 2, something where people are willing to wait, because otherwise they'll find ways around it. So long story short, yes, look at collaborating with HR on the enablement. Look at setting up something like an intake process to field, scout, review, prioritize, and approve and reject requests. That's important. And then seeing how you can work across the business with other functions. Also in the book, by the way.
I totally agree. I see the AI governance committees are kind of a related stem of this, where you might use that to get guidance on how to enforce the AI guardrails you initially create and how to evolve them over time. What are some of the other panelists seeing in this space around AI COEs, just beyond the technology, but starting to look at business, kind of a business incubator?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I do get this question often because a lot of customers are starting on their COE journey. Like, how do I set up the governance framework? I don't think it as a different thing like what we were doing in the past with the design review boards, change control boards, and everything. It's a similar approach. What we need to figure out is that who is the right set of teams within these boards. We talk about the design review board. We have the business process owners, we have the architects in there. You do it in the similar approach, but think about like every process that's coming your way in the design review board. How is AI going to help in that process? Like, are we thinking about implementing those agentic AI solutions in this process? You don't need to have a complete separate organization for this one, but rather think about like how is AI being incorporated into these existing org structures there.
No, thank you so much, Srini. I think I'd like to add, there are AI COEs, right, to bring some awareness and more a centralized organization to drive these standards and policies. That's really great.
Yeah.
But again, we are observing AI is everywhere, right? It's not in one area, one organization. Everyone has the ability to do like AI. And when I say everywhere, security organization has AI use cases, the IT operations has AI use cases, the business process areas, all areas, or manufacturing plants or sales centers, service centers, everything has AI use case. And the AI COE's job is not to go to everybody and to help them out, right? So sometimes they bring this awareness and the culture and the mind shift, but again, individual areas are also groomed. So for that, we also recently started with AI squads, where we can start business process owners, like how Srini is talking about AI architects. So these squads needs to become these incubators to drive AI change into their organizations, and how they see the North Star, how they see the future coming with agentic AI, and how they need to re-challenge and then reinvent everywhere. So that's one more point I would like to add.
Praveen, while you're kind of carrying the mic here, Robert had a question that connected to your business process understanding and are we looking at different process mining tools to understand what opportunities might be there?
Oh, we're looking at all tools. Because as you said, as an large enterprise, we have Celonis, we have Signavio, and if we do anything else, we would like to leverage them, because this is important for us when we talk about process mining and process knowledge. There is something that we can do from historic perspective. There's something we can do real time. And we have also recently looked at a technology called WalkMe, which is like SAP acquired this, which is a digital adaptation platform that's going to really tell you how the users are really reacting to the system in the real time. So all these insights have to be required as part of your process mining to identify the opportunities, whether they're small or big. That's just the answer I would like to say. So, but don't ignore one tool there. I think look at all the possibilities to get the best.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think just one
Other
thing to
comments?
add there, Grant, that when we talk about this process mining, we also talk about agent mining now, because the steps are being executed by agents in the future state. We should also think about the effectiveness of those agents, the traceability and the monitoring. Along with those end-to-end process, we should think about like how the agents are being incorporated and how they are running those processes effectively. That's also a key part. That's where like Signavio started with agent mining. We just started on the journey, but every provider is thinking about like how do we incorporate these agents in this mix.
Excellent point, Srini, and that's what we are connecting back to the audience to take away. Don't look at agents as technology objects, right, or technology components like maybe microservices or components that we built in the past. These need to be connected to the process. When you look at the process, and ultimately the product owner or the process owners or that you have in your organization will own the P&L for that process, whether it's a workflow, whether it's in a technology application, whether it's data services, whether it's your integrations or your agents. All of these fall under the stack of that one process owner, and it has to be part of the P&L so they can show how the process efficiency is improving with these agents. So if you think like that, the whole agent mining and agent flow are directly connected back to your process KPIs and your strategic business objectives.
While we're pulling on this thread, I think Tejas has a great question related to a consistent customer experience. With siloed AI development, Gen AI agents, how are they solving the challenge provided in a consistent customer experience across channels while still delivering business outcomes? I'll jump in to say I think we're not across the board. I think you kind of look at it like the Chief Architect Network has a framework called the Architect Innovation Pipeline. And what we look at is things that are earlier in that process are things that we are seeking to sort of experiment and learn and codify. And then it suddenly moves to the right and we start to then embed. So we don't need 15 million different ways to do RAG, right? Especially if we're building our own solutions. But where we're looking at agentic, it'd be a little too early to harmonize all the approaches in a single way. Well, what does the panel think?
Yeah, I'll just jump in there because I had practical experience and I'll be putting all my frustrations here. So think about this, guys. I think you asked a great question there. When a user interacts with an agent, I'll give you one use case there, and then let's say he's not getting the response from the agent, or he's not getting the right response, let's say. What would the user do?
Try again or abandon.
So when we are building these agents and these experiences, we are not thinking about the support model. We are not thinking about the training required, because if you don't think about the training and the support model, then all your investment you're making, all your costs that are coming is obsolete because the users are abandoning it. To Andreas' point, it really said it well. The second use case is, let's say an agent is autonomously performing some task and you don't have the visibility, or you don't have the auditability, you don't know where, what failed, when, what happened, and all that. Traceability is not there, then you're just a black box, and that's not how you execute your systems, right? So those are the two use cases that are telling you that. And when it becomes more complex, when your Microsoft agent is talking to Dual agent, talking to some other ServiceNow agent, and then Salesforce agents, and then bring all these agents, and then how are you bringing a unified experience, unified messaging, unified interactions? This is definitely an area that is evolving. We don't have a good answer to it, as this is one of the topics we need to learn as we move forward. But it's all going back to our design. How do we design? What is the problem we're trying to accomplish? And how do we not add this as one more system to the end user rather than ease his life, right? That's what we need to put it and thinking in the design process. Raj, Andreas, Srini, please go ahead.
So that's one area, like two answers. Like one is like as people try different things with the patterns published. So one of the things is like one person is successful or one person is like not successful. So we both invite them to a forum to brainstorm and share their experiences. By sharing the experiences, you get to learn from each other. So that's one thing that like we have seen it work a lot, especially during the early stages of like agentic development. And second is to your single control plane. So we, in our recent Ignite, we announced like Agent 365. So we work across all the ecosystem of partners. So we built like an agent repository or registry, and then we register, we see how we can control access, and we see who has access, like all those observability aspects of it. 365 view of like the agents is being kind of like being going to be audited, managed, for your point, Praveen. So we see a lot of opportunities there to mature, and that's kind of like how we're going to address your concerns as like an end user from a security perspective or a developer perspective. Even like, okay, from a developer, I need to understand how agents are performing in production. And then, as you know, like the models are getting released like almost every day. Your model performance could change depending on like what models get released, what capabilities get enhanced. So as you do it as a developer, I need to stay on top of it. So then that's when like I include all those evaluation metrics to see, constantly compare with the existing model and the new models as it get released, to see if like that changes the agentic performance. And it does. Then I could kind of put like human in the loop. Human jumps in, evaluates to see, hey, would I be able to swap out like any new models that can do the job better? So all those like view into is we are providing through the single control plane called Agent 365.
Super.
Just inviting you from Manisha's question to add the specific things you're finding at Salesforce and at Microsoft, right? Or especially Srini, if you might share your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I could start with the SAP one, right? Like probably just taking a few examples like that. I want to think about like what's a good example that I want to start with. Like talk about an accounting accruals agent that we have recently released, right? When we're doing an accounting accruals process, typically what we do is that it's an every month end, period end closing problem statement. The financial controllers, accountants sit together, figure out what is all my accrual postings to be done, figure out like how do I fill the journal entry files and how do I upload that steps. That's a traditional process we do. We have like 10 different steps to take care of it in the month end. When we talk about an agent reimagining the process, why do you even need to think about posting those entries, automating the posting entries, but rather think about like every time at the month end there's accrual process happening, and those postings are automatically being done into the journal entry files, into the GL accounts automatically. Don't even think about those process like let me automate one step out of these 10 steps, but think about like start it at the source itself. Like when we have the accounting accruals, just posting into the journal entries, we have an agent that does an end-to-end process right now. So that's complete reimagining of the process that we're doing traditionally right now. It's completely removed with the automation that we have now. That's just one example, but every agent we're talking about, think of it like that end-to-end process. How do I automate it, or how do I reimagine that process with this new approach?
Yeah, and then thank you so much, Srini. I think there are multiple of those where in the past we've been doing sequential and
Yeah.
waiting for things to happen, where we could say, hey, what do we really need to follow the sequence, or can we do something ahead of the game, or continuous updates, and then we can use it in the automation here. One point I would like to also conclude is a lot of these technology platforms or agentic AI platforms, they're not giving you just agents, they're also giving you the components of to build the agents, right? So the skill, jewels, they call it the jewel skills. Same thing with Salesforce, they have a lot of Salesforce reusable components also. So some of these cases where the platforms are not stepping up and reinventing the process completely, we as a customers or consumers can also take those small pieces and bits and fit to our purpose. How does our organization needs to adapt those processes? So it's, as I said, it's we are starting here. We are not matured completely, so you will not be expecting like there are 10,000 agents coming from SAP or Salesforce. They got what they got, but they have all these components that we can plug in and orchestrate as an agents to fit to our purpose also.
Yeah, we're way early in this process, guys. Just let me be clear on that. Like I was watching Andre Kapathi's podcast, right? He was telling, don't think it is an year of agents. It's actually a decade of agents. You're just starting now. Don't worry about, don't have the FOMO about the agents. Think about like how do we incorporate it to like more stabilized process. This is going to stay with us. So we have to spend time, think about like how do we set up your COI organization? How do you have this design process, everything run in place for it?
Well said. Pivoting to a more technical question, Chuck McComber asks, when we're talking about orchestration patterns and looking at how that might be different from more traditional approaches, what are your thoughts on the need for additional standards or traditional orchestration models, rather, RESTful APIs, Kafka, et cetera, provide a capable and adequate solution in this AI age? What are your thoughts?
So I think where it's different from integration and orchestration like we've done it before is that there's a level of variability in it. Praveen said it quite nicely. Yes, you can have an agent that works well in one system, but what if you add a more heterogeneous environment with multiple agents? To me, it comes back to also how do we communicate? Again, let's borrow for 1 second from how we all work. If you delegate a task to a person and they work with a few other people, if something goes wrong, who do you expect to come back to you? The person at the end of the chain or the person that you delegated the task to? So similarly, if we now delegate a task to an agent or to multiple agents and they work with each other, and maybe one of them gets something wrong or not quite right, how do you manage that variability? I think that's the difference compared to deterministic approaches and processes. Every time I give this input to this API, I get that output. Now every time I get the input, I get similar output, somewhat similar. That's the big difference from my point of view between agentic and traditional approaches so far.
No, thank you so much for that. I think the question is very interesting, Chuck, and certainly the traditional integrations are where we start, but we have to evolve into A2A and MCP based integrations. And the orchestration is a little different also because we'll be talking to multiple LLMs, their APIs, what APIs they offer. Some of them are streaming, as you rightly said, with Kafka. Some of them are more RESTful APIs. Traditional API model is what we start with. But again, focus on A2A and also focus on MCP is the starting point. But there might be more things that we don't know that we have to learn as we go into here. But that's my conclusion there. With the rest of the members, please jump in.
A2A is still early, just to be open, to be honest, guys. Everyone is exploring that one. That could be the one protocol that will run everything. We don't know, again, in the industry what's going to happen, but everyone is trying to work on the A2A. That's definitely required, like Praveen mentioned. And beyond that, every enterprise should think about, like, where do I do the orchestration? It's not just one answer for it. It's not just SAP or it's not just Microsoft or Salesforce or anything. It depends on where the majority of your business process is running. So some things could be well matured within the Salesforce, some things could be in SAP, but think about where majority of the data is existing. Where do you want to run the orchestration process? But how do you do the agent to agent integrations? That protocol standards are still evolving. I'm hoping that you would see a lot more in the next year. 2026 is going to be that year for us for that. Yeah.
I think that brings up an interesting point in connection with the question that we see on the screen. One of the questions that I have is how do I get work done at the end of the day? Is it that at some point in the future, let's say for simplicity's sake, I'll have Copilot, I have Joule because we have Raj and Srini here. And it doesn't really matter if I'm in Teams or in Copilot in my Microsoft environment, but I want to start a process that cuts across my Microsoft product, my SAP product, and maybe 2 or 3 others. And I can do the same thing if I'm in my SAP application and I now want to kick off the process and it touches some Microsoft Salesforce or some other application. So where do I start the process? How interchangeable are things going to be? Or will I be more locked in if I start here, if I start there? I think that's something to be considered as well as you're thinking about this, how you're architecting it. And
Yeah.
again, what vendors are doing and are open to enabling.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm just trying to and address this. How much of what we hear about agentic AI is false or exaggerated hype? See, guys, end of the day, the proof is in the pudding because you need to show the value. Okay, and you can't ignore a trend here. Let me be very honest here because the ability to ask questions and self-learn and the real-time help, and it's like a the self-learning part is huge here, and not all agents are um, autonomous. Number one, not all agents are to perform a task, right? Yeah, yes, performing a task is ultimate nirvana or north star for agent, but they're informational agents, they're navigational agents that can help the end users to learn about a new platform, new change management. Now people using legacy ERPs, all of a sudden they're putting in an intelligent ERP in the front. Then you need a real-time coach. You can't continuously watch for from training, and like those days are gone where you have slides and training videos, and then you train people and then they go on work and they're not productive. So you need to be real time to say, hey, you're doing this per process this way, or can I go to that navigation, or how do I do this? All these you need a real time agent that can help you to watch what you're doing and help you to be more efficient. Those are some simple use cases. So I would say the fact of false versus hype, you have to show the proof in the pudding and you have to show the use cases and you need to build on it. Some of them are small value, some of them are medium value, some of them are completely innovational and bringing new revenue, right? But we need to take the journey because we cannot ignore this. So I would say I don't want to be a sales agent for this agentic experience here, but the reality is we'll be at a loss if if we ignore that. We would have to take our baby steps, and as we are as we have said, we are planning for a decade here. So if you don't start now, it's already there. So that's what we wanted to leave you guys with. Okay.
Love that. I'll chime in as well. I think AI and agentic itself is not overhyped. I believe it's the AI washing and overselling of not that innovative, not that applied, or not that outcome-centric solutions that cause us to see things like the MIT study where the ROI isn't found at the end of the journey. Because a lot of times the work that was really needed to build the foundations for a particular use case and then to teach the AI and have the cultural tolerance for it to learn, because just like anything else, it runs in feedback loops. And then ultimately being able to codify it into a repeatable part of your process with the appropriate human engagement, which it may help with. It might decide, part of its decision is I'm going to act on this, or I might ask for help if I need to break a rule or two to make what I think is the right suggestion, or fail and say, I can't handle this request. Let me kick it to a human. So I think that it's kind of the appropriate first selection of use case and the right business strategy enablement. So you're doing something that matters at the end of the day if you actually pull it off, all the way down to the implementation and the rigor required to make a differentiating use case. What are others seeing in terms of that sort of hype navigation? Anyone else want to weigh in on that before we move to the next question?
So I think, yes, there is a lot of talk, a lot of conversation about it. Naturally, every time there's a new technology, vendors are talking about it. Yeah, that's how you create a market. That's how you create demand.
Yeah.
But what I think is different in many ways this time around is that also vendors are shipping, and they're shipping incredibly fast. Right? Every month, every quarter, there are new products, features, capabilities, agents, what have you. And it's to the point where you need to be asking yourself, are we able to adopt it fast enough? Right? So there's a flood of new information. There's a flood of new capabilities. How do we sift through what is new? How do we prioritize what makes sense for us? And how do we get it into the hands of our team members very, very quickly so we can benefit from it? So yes, hype pushes the topic, but also, there's a lot of delivery. There's a lot of capabilities becoming available.
Yeah, and just to add, right, like think about we should have our expectations clear. Like, don't think that agents are going to solve everything in the enterprise problems, but they're just starting now. Their maturity will more and more the agents learn, the maturity comes in, like just how us, right? Like year 1 of our career versus year 20 of our careers, we're so matured enough. The agents also needs that learning capability. It will happen, take the time, like 2 or 3 years down the line, but don't expect that everything would be done in the year 1 itself. So think about, going back to my old question about like high frequency, low variability problem statements, try to solve them with the agents to start with, and slowly feed them to get into the more complex problems from there.
Love that. I wanted to kind of balance some of the technical questions with some of the more adoption-based questions. What are you folks seeing in terms of the role sandboxing is playing in adopting agentic solutions and workflows?
So this whole grant, like the vibe coding with GitHub, so it's kind of like creating like a shell with almost like 40% of the code, and that gives you all the foundational elements. And depending on like what MCP servers that you use, like depending on different sources, it pulls in all the knowledge and providing the right context with the right information. GitHub is able to generate a lot of like useful information that like saves a lot of time, and it also is used to fix issues. So that's kind of like where we are seeing a lot of traction in, and then getting a view into like how the tickets get tracked, addressed, and then like once it's deployed, it kind of like pays attention to the observability aspects of it. So that's where like we are seeing a lot of traction. Is what it'll really like improve as it catches up with more models that you have at your disposal. And then the openness, like for example, before we were very particular about like biased about like OpenAI models. Now we open it up. So like if you use GitHub, you can use like all the models from Gemini, models from Anthropic. So that flexibility as a developer that you get is definitely is going to be a game changer.
Okay.
Amazing. I think I'll just comment on the sandboxing value in the whole agentic workflows. We realized as we are building this in sandbox and we are iterations, and as Andreas was saying, it's an incremental right approach to design and development. We got a lot of designing done as part of the sandboxing, right? So I think all these business use cases, if we can put some iterations of sandboxing, I think that'll be the right start point.
Yeah, and the time it takes to build these things are much faster now, right? Like it's not like the traditional days to build an app. It takes months and months. With the AI, it's actually much faster to build these agents or the skills. So definitely, I totally agree on that part. Like thinking about doing it in the sandbox as a POC, show that one to the business users and start from there evolving. Absolutely key part.
Yeah. So Grant, I'll take the Aditya's question here. I think the agent sprawl, right? So I'll give you a couple of pointers there. One is there's a lot of sandboxing kind of happening before we can really say, hey, this is the agent we need. So we just need to have some leeway for that. That's number one. Number two, once you identify the agent, then you need to follow your responsible AI governance and whatever to register the agent and make it in the catalog so that it's visible for your enterprise. Those are the two things I would advise. One is having that enterprise AI catalog, and then second thing is going through the same responsible AI governance. I think those two are minimums to make sure that these are agents that are really confirmed to be purposeful in the enterprise. And while you're leaving some space for the sandboxing and evolution and trying out kind of a environment available for your users.
Love that. Maybe we got time for one final question, and I'll make this a little more broad, but then also we'll have a chance to kind of share some final thoughts. Matt Kern asks, do you see the need for architects to better understand culture to succeed? I have a thought on this, that we've been kind of, in many cases, allowed to play technical architect, but in this new age of AI, I think understanding culture and communicating in our organizations couldn't be any more important. It's an invitation to step into the strategy parts of architecture as opposed to sort of just that solution architecture final mile of we know what we want to do, now just help us make it happen. I'm curious what you folks think and are seeing. And in addition, maybe broadening the question, what other skills are important for architects to start to focus on in this new AI age that we're in?
So Grant, I don't want to say that we're not doing all the good work here, but from architects' perspective, but I think there's definitely I want you guys to step back, guys, and rethink about it. When we are telling the story, are we telling the right story? The storytelling is really critical. When we say storytelling, it's not about narration, but it's all about the facts and the points of the enterprise, right? So as we discussed about, are we putting always the business model in context, the capabilities, the processes, always taking the top down data, information, security, applications, technology, how we are tying that together? I don't see that's happening consistently. Okay, it's maybe me, but not everybody might be doing it great. But that is the discipline that we as an architect needs to embed in our storytelling, to say, without understanding the business objective and the KPIs, critical success factors, if you are jumping to tell, hey, this is the solution out there, it's technically, this is the architecture, these are all great, but telling that story end to end is really must in this kind of a scenario. That's number one. Number two, as we talked about the context, right? The understanding the context from architecture. How do we architect the context? Having the process, the data, the controls, the APIs, the whole story in the context is to be very, very clear as we are building that skills. And the second most important thing I would also add is the collaboration. We as an architect tries to be the heroes all the time, and we want to try as if like it's our work, kind of passion comes in first. But we need to put our business owners and the process leaders and the process owners to drive more, take the leadership, and then we become more advisory, and then let them lead, because it should be business led or process led kind of, because they need to own the P&L, and they need to be responsible for this continuous improvements. Because from architecture point of view, we always come and give the guidance and the suggestions, but at the same time we need to make sure that the balance is strike there in terms of owning this initiatives. Please add on more, guys.
Andreas, maybe share your thoughts and give us
Sure.
a second plug for your book.
Yeah, awesome. So first of all, here it is, AI Leadership Handbook. It's all about how do you bring AI technology into a business to achieve business outcomes. But my view there is, you're architecting a lot more than systems, processes, and technologies. Now you're architecting the way that work is done in the future. So that's a big opportunity and a big responsibility too. So if I can challenge you to do one thing, it's get closer to the HR function in your business, right? Let me borrow one last time, one third time from that analogy of how do we work together as people, and what have we figured out in terms of processes, guidelines, and so on. I think there's a lot that we can learn and that we can apply to how we set up our agentic architectures, how agents communicate, how we ensure that they're safe and secure and they have access only to the data that they're supposed to. Right? Same with people and access. How do we ensure they collaborate and communicate across different silos, different parts of the process? How do we change work completely, right? In a business, we have new roles that periodically move in. There are others that are phased out. Same thing here as well. How do we train them? How do we make sure they adhere to guidelines and codes of conduct? How do we keep their knowledge fresh? Training. So all of these aspects, in my mind, apply now as well as we bring agents into the mix. So borrow from those ideas, borrow from those concepts that we already know, that we've already figured out in business, and to bring it all together, right? Starts with your business strategy. What are we trying to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years, or even longer term? How does technology enable us reaching these goals in that time frame or sooner? Agentic AI might be one part of the puzzle, but it's hopefully not the entire answer. How do we decide what are the most valuable things that we should focus on? Prioritize them. Assess the value. Align with your business stakeholders. Is this something that would move the needle? Are you fully behind this if we execute this, if we pilot this, if we implement this? Right? All the way to how do we bring our people along, whether it's in-app training like Praveen was mentioning, in coaching, or if it's more the traditional learning and development approach. Here's a training so you get the basics, then work and then come back type of thing. So it's an entire flywheel, but I hope what you take from this is it's multidimensional. And as architects, we're not just architecting technology, processes, and systems, but really the future of work is of how work is done.
Love that. Raj, would you mind sharing a few final thoughts with us?
So yes, Grant. So one of the things I already pointed out, critical thinking, how important it is as an architect when you design not apps anymore, like you design agents. So that we talked in a bit. And another thing we are hearing a lot is, as you see the gap, we heard about the term shadow IT. Now shadow AI is coming into the picture and trying to fill the gap. So we have to be very important in acknowledging that and ensure that like unsanctioned tools don't come into and cause like data leakage and compliance failures. So that's an angle definitely we have to pay as an architect. I would pay a lot of attention to, and then ease the path for like all the team members to make it easy to adopt Gen AI in their workflow and get their job done.
Srini, final thoughts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everyone mentioned great point. Like design thinking is absolutely critical. I totally agree with that. One last point I will say is don't rush into POCs just to show something to the leadership, but think about what exactly is the business value that you're trying to get out of that. Just in case if the CIO is asking to rush things and show some POCs, right? Just tell them exactly what is critical, do we need to build. There is a lot of foundation work to be done to make an effective POCs and effective productive use cases. So think it long term, think the 10 years vision, not the next 1 year part of it.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate the conversation from our outstanding speakers that were very vulnerable, sharing their own perspective. None of us have it all figured out at this moment, and had some great advice. And of course, to our members in the Chief Architect Network, Praveen, having put this session together, and to many of you who joined with comments, questions, and really thoughtful engagement throughout the event. If you happen to be a chief architect, managing 10 or more architects, or about $1 billion in scale of architecture in any current or previous role, join us at chiefarchitectnetwork.com. It's no cost, it's a 501c3, and it helps bring conversations like this into our industry. So without any further ado, thank you so much for spending your Monday after a holiday with us, and hope you all have a wonderful set of holidays coming in the month ahead.
Awesome.
Thank you all, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
It's a pleasure.